Used car prices just spiked nearly 5% year over year. And no, it's not just some random supply chain glitch. This is the start of a stealth inflation wave driven by new tariffs and quietly hitting the most vulnerable Americans the hardest. All right, folks, so we're heading deeper into the economic twilight zone as 2025 plays out. And you've probably heard that car prices are creeping back up. But when you dig into the reason why, you start to see a bigger picture emerging. One that involves policy changes, tariff shocks, and a feedback loop that's pricing out working class Americans. Let me show you what's really going on here. And a quick shout out to SD Bullion for supporting the channel. Buy your gold and silver at SD Bullion right now. New customers get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. So Ford is raising prices on vehicles manufactured in Mexico. Why? Because of new tariffs the U.S. imposed on imported cars and parts. Now, these aren't high-end SUVs or luxury vehicles that we're talking about. These are budget vehicles, the kind that working families rely on. And it makes sense. Manufacturing costs are cheaper in Mexico. So naturally, automakers manufacture their most affordable models there. But now these models are being taxed, and that cost is getting passed down to consumers. Not to the top 10%, but to the most financially vulnerable, the people who can't just absorb a $2,000 increase or stretch their car payment another 12 months. And here's the kicker. This isn't just some downstream economic ripple. This started with policy announced officially by the White House in March. And this isn't speculation, this isn't theory. These are real price hikes paid by real consumers brought on by tariffs. Now, at the end of April, the White House actually modified the executive order that imposed these tariffs on imported vehicles. Ostensibly, it was to prevent automakers from paying a double tariff on steel and aluminum as well as on vehicles and parts. But that in itself tells you something. These policies are already creating significant enough friction that adjustments had to be made. And that confirms one thing loud and clear. These tariffs do in fact hurt automakers who import vehicles. Now, let's take a look at the used car market, because you'd think maybe people could shift over and find some relief in the secondhand market for cars, but that's where things get even worse. This is the Manheim Used Vehicle Value Index. And according to their most recent data, used vehicle prices jumped by 4.9% year over year in April. And perhaps even more significantly, this was a 2.7% increase in just 1 month from the March numbers. Now the index has risen to the highest level since 2023. And you can see what's happening here, right? Tariffs push the price of new cars up, budget-conscious consumers then pivot to used vehicles, demand for used cars spikes, and so do prices. It's a domino effect. So now the working class buyer who is already priced out of a new vehicle is getting squeezed in the used market as well. And let's just walk through this chain reaction here. So tariffs go up on imported cars and parts, then automakers like Ford, they pass that cost down to consumers. And the most affected? Well, it's the lower end of the market, the consumers who are most vulnerable to rising costs. Those consumers then turn to used cars, demand jumps, and so price follows. And this is how stealth inflation works. It doesn't hit with a headline CPI number. It hits when your 10-year-old Honda breaks down and the cost to replace it is suddenly out of reach. But it gets deeper than that. If automakers don't pass the full cost on, well, then they're the ones who absorb it. And that means slimmer margins, lower earnings, potential layoffs, and eventually falling share prices. Either way, the system ends up taking a hit. It's a squeeze from both ends, consumers and producers. But this is more than just a car story. This is a warning sign, because what's happening here is a test case for what happens when the U.S. tries to reshore manufacturing or play hardball on trade without a clear economic cushion in place. Sure, it sounds great on the podium, bring manufacturing jobs home, but in reality, you can't just tariff, aka tax, your way back into prosperity. Anyone who has an understanding of free market economics should realize this immediately, especially when your own supply chains are already stretched thin and your working class is already maxed out. And the thing is, it doesn't matter who's in the White House. When these decisions get made, the little guy gets crushed. And this isn't about left versus right. This is about us versus inflation. And anyone who's been watching this channel for any lengths of time knows that I was highly critical of the previous administration and their boneheaded decisions that raised inflation as well. And, I cover gold and silver for a reason. It's not because they're exciting or trendy. It's because they represent something that isn't getting debased by policy decisions made on a whim. They represent wealth outside of the system. Because this is what it looks like when fragility leaks into the real economy. And if this is how fragile things get from one tariff shift, what happens when the next shock hits? You've got to be thinking long term when it comes to inflation. That doesn't just mean watching the CPI, it means watching the middle of the economy quietly unravel. If you've seen prices go up in your area, especially on used cars, drop a comment below and hey, subscribe if you want to stay one step ahead of this mess. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the one that's popping up on your screen now. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay safe and happy stacking. I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.